Hello, Steve White, Trek89 for Steve That's 89. Well, I saw this Facebook post from the Paramount Plus Facebook page for Star Trek Discovery the other day on Twitter, and I didn't react to it immediately because it's nothing new. It's something that we see all the time from Discovery fans, a lot of trolling where in order to prop up Discovery, they'll try and insult or diminish the original series particularly and the other original canon Star Trek shows. So it wasn't really surprising, but it is kind of mind-numbing and annoying when you read this sort of thing because often they're totally wrong, totally inaccurate and ignorant, and they're just there to gaslight people who don't know any better, and they're just trolling and insulting. So I'll read it out straight without any commentary, and then I'll go through the points later. It says, we have short seasons now for several reasons. Number one, quality writing isn't a rush job. 20 plus seasons is factory TV. It was never art. Number two, modern shows are written by professional authors, where older TV shows was written by teams of staff who write many shows to fit predictable formulas. Number three, modern Trek is serious, no space hippies or weird balls of fur. They're called trebles. And you know that, or you would if you'd even watched Discovery. They don't have to fill schedules with fluff that really doesn't fit the general universe. Like the 8 ways to travel in time by accident, or a drunk virus that has to infect every TV show, or the boring flashback episode that TNG was famous for. It's not what TNG was famous for. Star Trek grew up. The great miniseries of all of television were short and satisfying. That is the model we all enjoy now. Well, there's just a whole bunch of inaccuracies and ridiculousness in that. And I really didn't think about it much. I read it and thought, I'm not commenting on that because it's just so beneath me. And then everyone else started commenting on it. I thought, I kind of have to, have a little bit of YouTube therapy on this one. But yeah, quality writing isn't a rush job. 20 plus seasons is factory TV. Well, no, that's not true. All TV shows had longer seasons before streaming. Now, why streaming shorter things? I think they just sort of worked out people can binge shows and they're going to watch so many episodes, so we don't need to do 20 episodes because people won't even get through them in a binge. And it's just a different market and different format, so they just have always done shorter seasons. Like, I think it's sort of been the same with some cable shows as well. Sort of the same reason. They had less money and they didn't need to fill weeks and weeks and weeks of TV and so forth like the commercial channels did. But that doesn't mean there was less quality. They just had more writers. They had more time. They worked for more weeks. They didn't spend less time per episode than Discovery and other shows, modern shows, do. Some have a little bit more time per episode. Some shows are sort of given a bit of special treatment, but most aren't. They usually do each show in 1 to 2 weeks, which is what Next Gen and all that did. They had their main shooting, which was a week, but then they had time that sort of overflowed and things that sort of overlapped, so they had more than a week per episode. I think it turned out to be around 10 days or something. I mean, I'm going back to remember all these sort of things that you'd hear at the time. But yeah, often they do 20 plus episodes. The original series started off with 28, 29 episodes per season. Next Gen was usually 26, Deep Space Nine. Once they got onto UPN, they dropped down a little bit, and by the time they got to Voyager and Enterprise, some seasons were 20, 22 episodes. New Trek usually does 10 to 15. And that's mostly so it can be binged, I think, and I'm not really sure why. They claim it's for quality, but they don't actually spend more time per episode, so that doesn't work out. If they spent 2 or 3 weeks per episode, so they had more time to write it and work on it, then that would make sense, but they don't actually do that. So that's just a myth. And just to claim that TV was never art before now is such an insult, from Twin Peaks through to so many other shows of the 80s and 90s that really are great and really were art. To say that is, it's just going back, it's just so backwards, back when people used to believe that movies were art and TV wasn't, because that used to be the idea once. And this is like 40s and 50s and 60s sort of thoughts. But that eventually changed and people actually realised that TV is as much art as film. And then with cable TV, it got even better. And at this point, you can't tell the difference now. That doesn't mean it wasn't art before. So that's just insulting to everyone who ever produced TV. Modern shows are written by professional authors, whereas older TV shows are written by teams of staff, basically just wrote to fit predictable formulas. That's not true either. Now, Discovery has followed many formulas, and there's many formulaic episodes there, so that just happens with TV. That just happens with writing. It doesn't matter how many episodes you do. There are only so many ways to tell a story. So yeah, that's just not true. Modern Trek is serious. No space hippies or weird balls of fur. No, sorry, you've had worse than space hippies. And you had trebles. If these people even knew the show, they'd know season 1 had trebles all through it, and they did short treks all about trebles. So, and they had other ridiculous things in that show that I was looking at going, seriously? Isn't this supposed to not be camp? Or like, they contradict themselves. Yeah, they go on to say they don't have to fill the schedule with fluff, like, 8 ways to travel by accident, time travel by accident. How many times has Discovery time travelled? How many times has Discovery... I mean, they time travelled to a whole nother century and then didn't change anything really about the show to actually really adapt it to what it would look like 900 years from then. And yes, a drunk virus. They've done plenty of lame story ideas. For the short amount of episodes they've done, they've had their lame moments too, which, considering how many less they've had, they shouldn't have had as many. And the idea that Star Trek grew up, the new show is not any more sophisticated than the original Star Trek, especially on an emotional level. The characters and so forth are very immature and not developed. And the idea of criticising the original show and saying because they made more episodes, there was less quality, and somehow this new show is more sophisticated when they don't spend really much more time per episode. They still work basically on a weekly schedule, roughly. It's not like making 2 or 3 times less episodes, they spend 2 or 3 more times on the individual episodes. It just doesn't work like that. That's the myth they want to produce, that somehow this show is better, it's more quality. It's just not true. The original Star Trek was one of the most expensive shows on TV. They put all the people who worked on that up until the last season. There was a little bit of the factory. There was a little bit because Gene had left. The people who really cared about the show had left at that point. There was a little bit of that. That is true. But it wasn't in the first 2 seasons, and it wasn't because of how many episodes they made. It was just because the people who loved the show were forced to leave because of creative issues and that. And I would argue that there's some of that in Next Gen in some of the better seasons, but other people would argue and say, no, Next Gen was the best and they were brilliant and everything. I think on some level they were trying to be generic science fiction. But again, that wasn't because they made too many episodes. That was just because they thought that's what the audience wanted. And, Deep Space Nine, they had a different objective where they really wanted to try and do long-form storytelling, and they pushed that for years before they were allowed to do it. So that didn't do anything. Like Next Gen. Voyager, a lot of people complain about Voyager, saying they reused episodes, but again, there's only so many ways you can tell a story, particularly in science fiction. There's always going to be a time travel episode, and Discovery's done them. There's always going to be, a monster episode. There's always going to be... There's cliches in science fiction, and some of them we love. There's a reason there's haunted house episodes and zombie episodes and elevator shows and stuff like that, because I think on some level we all want to see our show do their version of some of these classics, and they do their own thing as well. And the more episodes you have, the more chance you have of variety. And when you only do 10 episodes and they're all one story, telling just a different element of one story, it's really not great storytelling. There's a possibility of spending time with the characters, so you might have good character development and smaller moments that you wouldn't normally get in a TV show that's trying to get through a whole story in one show, or 3 or 4 acts, or however many. But yeah, they just don't tell a better story. They don't even tell a story. Like I said, it's just parts of the story, and maybe they can focus on a few elements that maybe the other episodes don't, but you just don't get a whole story. You don't get from that what you would get from a whole episode. So and it's nonsensical, it's ridiculous. It's just there to insult Star Trek, to put Star Trek down, to try and elevate Discovery and New Trek and all the other shows from the New Trek range, because they do have flaws, they do have faults, they don't have the same sort of following and the same sort of love as the originals. They're objectively not as good. They're just not. And they're trying to make them look better by putting down the other shows because they have to try and reduce them because they look so good and they have such a legendary reputation, and people love them. So they have to try and bring them down to try and bring their show up, and that just shows weakness. It shows how weak your show is. If you have to, anything is weak if you have to minimize something else to make something your thing look better. It should stand on its own. You shouldn't need to do that to promote it or celebrate it or whatever. So it's not new. It's just troll behaviour. I'm tired of it. It happens all the time. And I'm surprised this post got so much attention when I see comments like this all the time. But it did. I commented on it. It was interesting to see what other people thought. I'm going to go. Feel free to share, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think and what you thought of that comment. Thanks, that post. Thanks. Bye.